Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I'm going to be talking about female authors that I want to read in the next year or two. This list is exclusively female authors that I have never read before. There's a ton of female authors that I have already read books from that I want to read more books from, but this list is exclusively authors that I have never read and that I am really keen to read in the next couple of years. They are all fantasy and sci-fi authors. I think there's about 8 or 9. It's not ranked either. These are all kind of equally as high on my list, apart from maybe 1 or 2 authors, which will be the first 2 authors that I talk about. So I think with that in mind, we can jump into the video. So the first one, and this is definitely higher priority than the others, apart from the second one, is N.K. Jemisin, who is the author of a bunch of different series that include the Broken Earth trilogy, the Inheritance trilogy, the Dreamblood duology. She is an absolute powerhouse in the world of fantasy. I think one of her series is also like sci-fi fantasy mashup, and she's also won like a ton of awards. Not to say that awards necessarily indicate that an author is particularly good, but I think sometimes people do care about those things. I think she's won a bunch of Hugo Awards. From what I've heard from other readers and from things that I've seen online, it seems to be that her worlds are very immersive and she tackles really interesting themes around power, oppression, but also identity, which are all things that I really like in my books. I honestly cannot believe that I've not read any of her work yet. It's honestly quite shocking. I would like to try and rectify that this year, maybe with her duology, because I've got a bunch of, trilogies that I want to read. So it will be easier for me to fit that in. But this is an author that I am desperate to read because I've generally only heard really good things about her writing. The next one, which is also a higher priority than the rest that will follow, is Ada Palmer. And she is the author of the Terra Ignota series, which with like the first book being like To Like the Light, which I have mentioned on my channel before. She's much more like a sci-fi author, and she blends sci-fi with philosophy and political intrigue. And I think her series also is a world where gender roles are completely abolished. Utopian ideals are tested and questioned. From what I can tell, her books seem to be very intellectually and morally complex, which is stuff, as many of you who will know, I love that in my books. I love philosophical books. I love books that make you kind of question your own morality, your own limits, and the fact that these are also very political is a massive plus for me. I am almost certain that I will start Terra Ignota this year because I'm just so excited. You might actually be able to see my copy of the book. It's like over there somewhere. But I do own the first book and I own the other 2 books on Kindle. So I am super psyched because this author seems like the sort of author that I'm going to love. Funny little side note, she's actually very good friends with Jo Walton, who is another sci-fi author that I've raved about on this channel. They're actually very good friends from what I understand, and they're actually writing a book together from what I understand, which I cannot wait for. Honestly, so excited. Can't wait to read this author. Next, we have Kate Elliott, who is a fantasy writer. She's written series like Crow of Stars, Crossroads, Spirit Walker. In a video that I did recently about new releases that are coming out this year, she was also featured on that list. She's got a duology coming out this year that I'm really excited to read. I've heard that her writing reads much more like epic fantasy with very detailed world building, complex and politically driven plots. I've heard that her books are actually quite dark, which I was quite surprised to read, but I'm very excited about because, as we all know, I do love darker, grimdark fantasy. And I've also heard that she does tend to talk about themes that are very typical of fantasy, which are things around like oppression, power, politics, which again, all stuff that we love. Lots of themes around like destiny as well, from what I understand, which I'm also quite interested in. Destiny is a big aspect of Baker's works, and that's, I think, as part of the reason why I love his book so much, because I do love like the discussion around destiny and like whether people can actually have a destiny and what happens when you try to fight your destiny. Stuff that I find particularly interesting and I am quite curious to see explored in Kate Elliott's works. Then we have another author that I'm very interested in. I have one of her books on Kindle, and that is Rebecca Roanhorse. She wrote the Black Sun trilogy, and I believe her work is like indigenous inspired. It's quite dark. There's like apocalyptic settings and there's like vengeful gods, which again is all stuff that I really like the sound of. I heard generally very positive things about that series. The first book, I remember a lot of people raving about it when it first came out. Second book was a little bit lukewarm, and then there were like mixed but generally positive reviews on the third book. So definitely a series that I'm going to pick up at some point. Very, very excited because I'm very intrigued by like the vengeful gods and the apocalyptic settings. It's stuff that I really like. I think it's stuff that we all like, and I'm always quite curious to see how authors are tackling those sorts of things. Then we have Catherine Arden. Catherine Arden is quite a beloved author on BookTube. Everybody, from what I can tell, loves her writing. She wrote the Winternight trilogy. The first book is The Bear and the Nightingale, which I believe is like Russian folklore. It's very atmospheric, quite poetic, quite lyrical storytelling, which I do like that when I'm in a particular mood. She also has a new series that came out last year. The first book came out last year that I'm more interested in reading. I think it kind of covers a lot of the same stuff from what I understand, but it's just like a completely different story. I think I'm more likely going to read that than I am the Winternight trilogy. Not to say that I'm not ever going to read the Winternight trilogy, it's just nowhere near at the like top or middle of my list. So I definitely want to read her new book, maybe this year, maybe next year, but she's definitely an author that I've been keeping a beady eye on because lyrical writing, folklore, things that in theory I like. So we'll give it a go. Next, we have an author that is very famous for her series that I think is still currently running. I could be wrong though, so feel free to correct me down below. I feel like this author has a cult following. Like I feel like I always see like fan art on Twitter and fan art on Reddit. Like I feel like this is one of those series that I just see a lot of people talk about, but also like contribute to, if that makes sense, with their art, the theories, which I love. I love it when an author or a series is able to really evoke that sort of feeling in their readers. It's fun. We all love to be a part of it. And so the author is, I'm actually really curious if anyone's guessed it, it's Tamsin Muir, and she's the author of the Locked Tomb series, which the first book is Gideon the Ninth. This is a gothic, necromancer-filled sci-fi saga full of a lot of dark humor, and I think there's some body horror in it as well. Honestly, sounds like the complete antithesis of what I would enjoy in my books, but I have a feeling this series could work for me. I don't know what it is. I think maybe it's the dark humor. Maybe it's because I've heard that the series is also very character-driven. I don't know, but I feel like something could work for me. I'm definitely going to give it a go at some point. Curious if anybody's read Tamsin Muir, because a lot of my people who watch my channel, I don't think would typically read Tamsin Muir, but if you have read her series, let me know down below in the comments and let me know what you think, because I am very, very intrigued. Next, we have an author that I'm actually quite surprised is on this list, but after speaking to one of my Patreons about it, he really sold it to me, and this author to me, that I ended up getting the first couple of books on ebook because they were on offer. And that is Marie Brennan, and she has written the Memoirs of Lady Trent series, with the first book being A Natural History of Dragons. It's academic, it's Victorian-inspired fantasy, and she is a scholar who is studying dragons. I've heard it's super cozy, it's quite heartwarming, it's quite light, and sometimes that's what you need, even as a grimdark and dark fantasy lover, somebody who is very skeptical about the world. Sometimes you need a cozy read to break that stuff up. I'm almost certain that I'm going to start this series this year because I think it's going to be a great series to read in between heavier stuff that I'm reading. I'm reading like quite a lot of classics this year, but like classics about like humanity and the human condition, which can often get quite dark and quite pessimistic. So I'm really curious. Yeah, really, really curious. I feel like she also has a bit of a cult following. I feel like people really love her books. And I've genuinely never heard anything negative about them, so I'm definitely going to give her writing a go. We have 3 more left. The next one is a Mexican author that I still am a little bit on the fence about trying, but I will give her books a go because she's written a lot of like standalones as well. And that is Sylvia Moreno Garcia. I feel like everybody talks about her books, everybody raves about her books. I feel like she's always on these lists, and that's great. Like I'm really happy that she's achieved that level of a success. I just don't know if she's going to be for me, to be honest. She's written books like Mexican Gothic, Certain Dark Things. Mexican Gothic is probably the one that I will start with, but she blends fantasy, horror, with very kind of, from what I've heard, rich atmospheric storytelling, which again is something that I really appreciate in my writing. So while it might not necessarily be what I typically read, there is the potential that there is something that I like in her backlist. So I'm almost certainly going to give her a go. Then we have a pretty old school fantasy writer. Not to say that she's old or anything, but I think she's been around a while and she's written a lot of fantasy books, and that is Anne Bishop. She's written a couple of different series like the Black Jewels trilogy. I do actually own the first book in the Black Jewels trilogy, and I'm quite excited to pick it up because I think it is fantasy, but there is like a romance element, but it's like romance fantasy done really well. It's very much adventure filled and quite dark from what I've heard as well, which is always a plus. I think there's themes around like power and sacrifice, and there's also like blood magic in, I think it's the Black Jewels trilogy, which I'm curious about. I'm not gonna lie, like I think Anne Bishop is one of those authors that's always been on my mind, but I've just never made the move to pick her up. But I feel like now, or at least in the near future, is the time to do so. Finally, we have a British Ghanaian fantasy author. I don't know why all of a sudden I started calling out people's ethnicities and backgrounds. Bizarre. But she is a British Ghanaian fantasy author, and she is known for The Final Strife, which I believe the final book is out, or it's coming out this year. That's the Ending Fire trilogy, and the reason why I'm interested in her works is I've actually read part of her first book, but I just wasn't in the mood for it. She blends African and Arabian mythology, and there's a lot of exploration around like rebellion, power, but then also identity, like coming of age as well. I really liked what I had read, but as I said, I was just really not in the mood for it at the time. What I'd read showed me that she can do really good world building, and the characters, while typical for fantasy, like felt quite fresh, and I just quite liked her writing style. I really love fantasy that has Arabian and African lore, or like a vibe. So I'm a big fan, yeah, and I think I'm gonna really like her when I give her another chance. As I said, it was nothing to do with her, it was completely to do with me and just my mood. So this is an author that I'm definitely going to pick up again because I liked what I'd read, and I've heard really, really good things about the series and how it turns out as well. So that's it. Those are female authors that I am really, really excited to read, and that I will be hopefully getting to you, if not in this next year, in the coming years. So let me know down below if you have read any of these authors and your thoughts on them, but I'm particularly interested if there's any other female authors that you yourselves are keen to read. And I will see you down below in the comments. Thanks for watching, folks. If you enjoyed it, please do give it a thumbs up, and I will see you in my next video. Stay safe, take care, and I will see you very, very soon.